If you would have asked me a year and a half ago if I would ever share my story, let alone come on social media and share my story, I would probably say that you are crazy. Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a little bit different. I have to say, now that I'm actually filming this, I am a little bit nervous. It is definitely something that's very personal. I'm definitely being really vulnerable right now sharing this with you guys, but it is something that I want to share, and I think more people need to be aware of this. I wanted to wait to share this after I had my baby for multiple reasons that I'll go into later in the video, but basically I wanted to share with you guys that I had a miscarriage. This happened about 2.5 years ago. Definitely is something that has changed my life and made me the person I am today because of it. And I do feel like I am okay to share this now. So 2.5 years ago, March 2017, the day was pretty much normal. I was working a nanny job at the time. I came home for my afternoon break. I had finished my workout, I was gonna shower, and then I was going to head back to pick up the kid that I nannied for from school. And something that was a little different about my routine this day is that I decided to take a pregnancy test. My period was about a week late, which wasn't abnormal for me, but I just decided to take one. At the time, I wasn't necessarily being super careful, but I had taken so many different pregnancy tests throughout a relationship that I didn't really think anything of it. I just took it and expected it to say negative and then I would move on, but that was not the case. It said positive, and that came as a complete shock to me. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't really want to be pregnant at the time, to be quite honest, and it just felt like really soon in our relationship, and I don't know, I just don't think that I was completely ready at the time that I got the result. Right away, we scheduled a doctor's appointment, and they confirmed that I was pregnant. I was about 5 weeks pregnant, and we got ultrasounds done. So after we got our ultrasound done, it was such a surreal experience for me. Obviously, when you find out you're pregnant, you know you're pregnant, but once you see the ultrasound, it's kind of trippy. So after that happened, I began to get kind of excited about it and started thinking about like what it would be like to have a baby, and that there's like this tiny thing inside of me growing, and I just really grew to love the idea of it, and I became really excited. We, at the time, didn't really tell too many people. We told a couple friends because it was kind of obvious that something was different with me just because I wasn't drinking. And it's like as soon as that happens and you say you're not drinking, that's the first thing people assume. So we did tell a couple friends. We were planning on a way to tell both of our parents about it, and we were actually planning on telling them on Easter. As the weeks followed, we had another doctor's appointment 2 weeks from our first one, and we went to that one. Everything looked good again. I think at that point, I thought that I was 7 weeks pregnant. I don't know why they didn't see that something was wrong sooner, but they didn't for some reason. So they still were kind of wondering why we couldn't see a heartbeat yet. So they scheduled an appointment 1 week after that one just to kind of go back and check that there was a heartbeat. So at that point, I was kind of having spotting, and I told the doctor. The doctor said that that was normal. Sometimes that happens in the beginning of pregnancy, especially like the first few weeks or so, and he said not to worry unless it turns into bright red bleeding, and that hadn't happened at that point yet. So I personally knew that something was wrong. I could just feel it. Something just felt kind of off, and I was trying to put it out of my head, but for some reason I couldn't. And I remember laying in bed one night, and I was like struggling, trying to be positive. Michael kept telling me like, oh, you need to be positive, and I couldn't. Like, I knew something was wrong. But then one night I was laying in bed and I started getting like really, really nauseous, and I like threw up out of nowhere, and I was like, oh my God, I have morning sickness. And I started to kind of get excited about it. So at that point, I kind of felt okay again. Like, I knew things were going in the right direction. And the next day, it was a Saturday, and we were going over to a friend's house for dinner and to watch a UFC fight. And of course, we're all sitting there, everyone's drinking, I'm not. Michael was excited, so he kind of like told everybody. And so he told everybody at the party why I wasn't drinking, and we were all talking about it, and everybody was excited for us, and I still felt like off. And so I went to the bathroom and my heart dropped. My spotting went from spotting to bright red bleeding. And at that point, like, I knew something was definitely not right. So I went back out and sat down, and Michael asked me what was wrong, and I just started sobbing. And obviously we had to leave the party. We went straight to the emergency room where there was a 4-hour wait, of course, because that's how it is. And we were talking to the lady at the front, and she was asking us like why we were there. And I told her, and again, just started sobbing. And she told me, like, if this is happening, there's nothing that doctors can do if you're having a miscarriage. Like, they can't stop it, so it kind of just has to like run its course, basically. So at that point, we were kind of torn whether to stay and wait 4 hours or to just wait until our next doctor's appointment, which was actually in like 3 days. So we decided to wait for that doctor's appointment. It was on Tuesday. We went to that appointment and I explained what was happening, and we did another ultrasound, and they were like, yeah, we should have seen a heartbeat by now, and there isn't one. You're miscarrying. So at that point, I just honestly felt like numb. Like, I didn't really know how to feel. It's like, as soon as I got excited about the pregnancy and everything, it just got taken away from me. The doctor didn't really explain like what to expect when you have a miscarriage. And when people kind of tell you about miscarriages, they basically just explain it as like a heavy period. So that's kind of like what I expected. I was not super talkative, so I wasn't really asking the doctor questions about what to expect. So he didn't tell me, I didn't know. So the doctor was not really the best doctor. He wasn't super nice, and when this whole thing happened, he was just so like unemotional, acted like he didn't care, and basically was just acting like he couldn't wait to finish up the appointment and like move on from it and go to the next person, which was, you know, like, it sucked. The last thing that he said to me, he handed me a pamphlet and basically said, here's a pamphlet in case you get depressed. And it was basically just on like depression after having a miscarriage. So that was kind of messed up. And then he left. That night, I just honestly was numb. Like, I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. I just felt so, I don't know, like I couldn't explain it. The days that followed, I definitely had a lot more bleeding. And then what I noticed was blood clots. And this is something that people don't talk about. It definitely disturbed me and shocked me completely. But I didn't really want to call this doctor and like talk to him after what happened. So I basically was just like Googling stuff and doing anything I could not to go back and see him. So that whole entire week, it was basically like a heavy period mixed with other not so fun things. It wasn't until the end of the week, I think it was like Thursday night, I woke up at about 1 a.m. I was having like extreme period cramps, like the most painful I've ever had in my life. And I couldn't go back to sleep. I took ibuprofen, nothing was working. I basically was just like sitting in bed for like a few hours, just in an immense amount of pain. And a few hours into that, the bleeding became super, super intense. And the little blood clots that I was having, those were getting like much bigger. You know, I was like on Google trying to Google stuff. Michael was looking up stuff, and we were trying to figure out like what was going on. And they said that if you can soak through a pad in like less than an hour, that you need to go to the ER. Well, that was happening, and I just didn't want to go back to the doctor. It didn't matter who the doctor was. I just didn't want to be there after what had happened. So I was kind of just like letting it run its course. It was about like 3 a.m. It was getting more and more intense. I was sitting on the bathroom floor crying, bleeding out, and I got to a point where I started realizing that I was having contractions, and that's when my heart just like dropped. I was able to time them. They would come on, and then all of a sudden I would be in no pain, and then they would come back. At that point, I realized that my body was trying to push the baby out of me, and that was like really hard. That's something that the doctor didn't tell me was gonna happen, and if I would have known that, I probably would have done things differently. I did have the option of getting that procedure done. I forgot what it's called, but they basically go in and take everything out. So I definitely think that I would have had that procedure done if I would have known. And I actually came to figure out that having that procedure can actually cause some complications with future pregnancies. So, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, everything happens for a reason, and there's a reason why I didn't get that done, and it actually helped later on. So eventually the contractions and the bleeding became so severe. We were this close to going to the hospital because of possible hemorrhaging. And then I decided to basically go to the bathroom like one last time and like get sorted out before we went to the hospital. That is when my body decided to push everything out. As soon as that happened, it basically like the bleeding slowed down and the contractions completely stopped. And that's when I realized that the baby was gone, and it honestly felt like something like ripped a piece of me out. Like I just felt so empty. Like even though I knew that I was miscarrying and that the baby was already dead, for some reason, like not having it in me anymore, I just felt so empty. Right after this happened, I feel like I didn't properly grieve it. I felt like I needed to move on from it. I just felt extremely alone and depressed and just like numb. Like I didn't cry a lot about it. I just, you know, tried to push through it. That next week was Easter, and that's when we were planning on telling our parents. It was hard, like trying to socialize and be around family, and I didn't tell them. In fact, I didn't tell anybody. The only people that really knew about my miscarriage were the people that knew I was pregnant, obviously, because all of a sudden I wasn't pregnant. But this was something that I hid for years, honestly. It's something that I didn't talk about. It's something that I couldn't talk about. And, you know, if I talked about it, I just would get super emotional, and I just couldn't tell people because I would just start crying. For about, I would say, a year and a half, I just tried to tell myself that I was okay, even though I wasn't. I'm really unhealthy when it comes to grieving, and I like to push everything down and not deal with it, and then it comes out later. So for me, mine came out about a year and a half after I had my miscarriage. And I didn't even talk to my boyfriend about it because I just felt pathetic. Like, why am I still so upset about this? And I don't know, I just didn't want to open up about it. It caused me a lot of problems. I became depressed. My anxiety got so bad. I had severe panic attacks, just felt down. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to do things. I was super like unmotivated. I guess I didn't really think entirely that this all had to do with that. I started realizing that it was like more severe. So the part that became kind of crazy that I didn't really want to talk about, because you know, when you think of PTSD, you kind of think of like people that go away to war or people that were like raped. You don't really think of PTSD with miscarriages, at least I didn't. So when I realized that I had that, I felt even more stupid that something like that would cause that. It definitely was a shock to me to see just how much this situation affected me. I would be at work and somebody would bring a baby in and I would just completely lose it. I would have to run into the back and, you know, try to get myself like not to cry hysterically. I would be watching TV and something would happen with a baby or something similar, or I would see a situation where somebody had a miscarriage and I would just have like a full blown panic attack, like hyperventilating, crying, like falling on the ground and just like curling up into a ball. Or I would see a commercial for like Clear Blue and I would just become extremely emotional about it. I honestly just felt like I hated my body. Like I couldn't understand why that this happened to me. I didn't know why my body couldn't successfully have a baby, and I hated it. I hated every ounce of it. And this definitely affected my relationship physically and mentally. I just became like so detached and just started like developing like unhealthy habits. Whenever I would drink a little bit more than I should, and every single time that would happen, I would turn into a different person. I would become angry, I would become emotional, and I would let that take over me. And it was all because of this underlying grief that I wasn't dealing with, and it was not healthy. And finally, when I opened up to Michael about how I was feeling, it just felt like a weight was lifted off of me. And at that point, I still wasn't ready to talk about it with people. It honestly wasn't until I was pregnant with Harper that I completely felt more comfortable talking about it. So with miscarriage, it's hard because I had this negative idea of pregnancy. I had only known a negative side to it. I didn't see the positive side of pregnancy. I just knew that pregnancy came with loss and death and all these horrible things. So when I became pregnant again, obviously there was a part of me that was excited, but also terrified of reliving that again. And it made the first trimester especially pretty hard. It still was one of those things where in the back of my head, I was so scared to become happy about it because I thought that that would get taken away from me again. And I honestly was pretty paranoid my entire pregnancy up until the moment that I gave birth, and knew at that point that my baby was out and happy and healthy and everything was fine. And that's sad, honestly. It was definitely something that I struggled with, and you know, every appointment that we went to, every ultrasound that we had, I literally would like hold my breath until, you know, there was like confirmation that everything was okay, or until we heard the heartbeat, or, you know, anything like that. I was like paranoid all the time with every single ultrasound. Every single time they got the Doppler out and they were listening to the heartbeat, even though I could feel her like moving around inside of me, you know, it's just like, it's so scary. Like I was so scared that, you know, I would hear the words, you know, there's no heartbeat again. At around 11 weeks is when I kind of felt like peace about it. So I feel like I couldn't make up this story if I tried. It's honestly one of those stories where definitely like a God moment for sure. So I was driving to work one day. It was a Sunday morning. I was going to a meeting and I was getting onto the freeway. I was listening to SoundCloud, and they have like a lot of like different remixes and stuff on there. And Somewhere Over the Rainbow came on. It was a remix of that song. And you know, it was playing. I wasn't really paying attention to it because I was just like in my head. I was literally driving and praying because, you know, I was almost at the point where I was done with the first trimester and I just still felt so terrified. And I was praying that everything would be fine and that God wouldn't take this baby away from me again. And I would do anything to make sure that she was okay. And as I was like praying, I looked up and there was like a huge rainbow in the sky. And I was like, oh wow, that's crazy. And then I looked down at the song playing and it was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I literally lost it and just started bawling my eyes out. That was definitely like a God moment. So Harper is a rainbow baby. And basically what that means, that's a baby that you have after you experience loss. And so the fact that that all happened and it all had to do with rainbows, and then the fact that she was a rainbow baby, it was just so crazy to me that that happened. From then on, I felt such a peace about my pregnancy. I still had doubts in the back of my mind, but it wasn't as bad as it was before. So the reason why I wanted to share this, for those of you that don't know, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And I've been seeing so many people posting their stories. Obviously, I've been wanting to post mine for a long time, but I thought now was really the perfect time to post this and spread awareness and share my story of, you know, what happened, how I got through it, and the outcome overall. Because I know, you know, after you go through a miscarriage, you literally think that you're never going to be able to have a baby again. For me, seeing other people's stories of, you know, what they went through and how they were able to successfully have a baby again, it just made me so hopeful and encouraged me that, you know, that could happen for me. And it did, which I am so grateful for. And obviously everybody's stories are different, and some people, you know, are not able to have a baby, and, you know, that breaks my heart. But I just want to encourage everybody out there that has gone through this. You're not alone, and, you know, if you have gone through it, I suggest that you really talk to somebody about it, because I didn't, and I held everything in, and it just made it so much worse, because the second that I started telling people about it, it honestly made me heal that much faster. With our last baby, obviously we didn't get much time with it, but, you know, that doesn't change how much I loved that baby and how much that baby has changed my life. And I feel like after going through that, it took me a long time, but I realized that God has a plan for you, and, you know, He knows the timing of everything, and that just wasn't my time. And I feel like going through that made me so much more grateful for the pregnancy that I just went through, and made me love my daughter so much more than I ever thought was possible. If you would have asked me a year and a half ago if I would ever share my story, let alone come on social media and share my story, I would probably say that you are crazy. But I just feel like a story like this is something that needs to be shared, and I really hope that it could help, you know, somebody, anybody out there who has gone through it and feels alone. Reading other people's stories and knowing that I wasn't alone in my feelings, it just makes you feel so much better. It's one thing to go through that situation physically, but then to go through it mentally, that was, you know, a really hard thing. Realizing that other people out there have gone through miscarriages and suffered from PTSD from it definitely made me feel better, and that I wasn't alone in that situation. 1 in 4 women will experience some sort of loss of pregnancy or babies, and 4 in 10 women will experience PTSD from it. And, you know, there's so many people that have gone through it that you may not realize. You know, you probably know somebody that has gone through it, and you would never know, because those sort of people, like I did, stay quiet. I think so many people would benefit from this being more out there in the world and people talking about it more. So I want to give my voice and share my story. If any of you out there need somebody to talk to, you can definitely talk to me. You know, you can message me on Instagram or comment below. I would definitely love to hear other people's stories and be able to reach out to you guys and talk to you about it. By sharing this, I also want to let you know that social media, a lot of it can be really fake, and a lot of people do make things seem like it's perfect on social media, which is really hard. So, you know, when you're going through something like that and you have all these people that you follow and their lives are just so perfect, it can be really hard. So I really appreciate all the people that are open and honest and share stuff like this, and I want to be able to do the same. I'm definitely not perfect. My life is not perfect. And, you know, after sharing this, you know that I have gone through stuff. And I want to share this not because I want you to feel sorry for me, because I'm okay. It's definitely something that I won't forget, but I have healed from it. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and listen to my story. This definitely isn't an easy thing to come on and share, but I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye.